very warm welcome to you here in person today, to the people who are, actually no, the camera is over here, I always the camera, and to the people who are following via the live stream. Today, as you know, is a very special day because we are celebrating here at St. Thomas, we are joining celebrations for the twinning, the centennial of the twinning between York and New York. So there have been a number of events surrounding this anniversary. And you'll know that today we have the Archbishop of York, we have a delegation from York, and we have the unveiling of this stone today at Evensong at 4 o'clock. So we thought that it was really appropriate that our Sunday class today should be on this topic and should help us to connect to an aspect of York, to a feature of York which will speak particularly to us here at St. Thomas, which is related to York Minster. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Alex McCallion, who is the director of Precinct at York Minster, and his husband Mark here. So you're really welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And thank you for accepting to give this presentation to us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We've actually, we arrived in the early hours of this morning. We've been on the Queen Mary for a week, so we've had a rather wonderful crossing on the way over. So I still feel like I'm rocking, so I hope that's not too visual. So, so I'm the Director of Works and Precinct. I have the privilege of leading the team who are responsible for the care and conservation of York Minster and its 7-hectare estate. The Minster was completed in 1475. It's the largest Gothic cathedral north of the Alps, and we have the largest repository of in situ medieval stained glass in England. So a treasure trove of stained glass and carved stone. The Minster, as I said, sits in a wider estate and part of an incredibly complex part of York city centre. So under English planning law, we have a system called listed buildings. So buildings of significance are graded from grade 1 to grade 2, with 2-star in the middle. All of our buildings are listed. All of the estate is scheduled, meaning that my team can't put a spade in the ground deeper than 6 inches without permission from central government. And of course, the whole estate and the building is under enormous public scrutiny. It's subject to extensive scholarly research. As I've mentioned, our window collection. We have a wonderful collection of manuscripts and silver, dating back the 2,000-year history of the site. So originally the site was where the Roman fortress was when the Roman legionary in the north were positioned in York. And then the whole site and estate has evolved since then. So we've been looking about how we create a sustainable future for York Minster, so how we're going to care for it in the 21st century. And throughout this presentation, when I talk about sustainability, I'm talking about 3 strands. So financial sustainability, so we've always got the money to look after the estate. Environmental sustainability, and then heritage craft skills. So we've always got the skilled men and women who have the skills to look after such a complex estate. So financially, this year it costs £33,000 a day to operate and look after the Minster and its precinct. We get no central government funding, so we are responsible for our own fiscal management. We're very lucky in York that we are one of the wealthier cathedrals, and we have an endowment fund, but we do charge people to come in and look around the Minster. And most people understand why, because you'll see in a minute the extent of restoration work that sits ahead of us. And we welcome about 750,000 visitors a year. And part of the plan that I've been working on, which you'll hear about, is about how we rebalance our business model so we're not overly reliant on paying visitors, that the estate has a role in generating funds as well. And then, of course, COVID struck in 2020 and our visitor numbers fell off a cliff. So we were very lucky. We have a York Minster Fund who subsidised the operation during that very difficult time. So our fabric costs are forecast at £11 million and rising. I've put a plus because we all know what's happened post-COVID with building materials. And then our capital projects are forecast at 17 million and rising over the next 5 years. Environmentally, despite its huge size, York Minster is actually an incredibly fragile building. I've put some images up here of the cavernous decay that we're witnessing around the cathedral. Very little of the external stone is original, probably only 10%, and you can date the restoration campaigns by the stone that was used by the masons at the time. And it's all limestone, but different types of limestone. So the Victorians used a limestone called Ketton. It's from North Nottinghamshire. It's a terrible limestone. Geologically, it's much younger than the magnesium limestone that the building was originally built from. And what the Victorians didn't realise was that if you put Ketton next to mag lime, you get a rapid cavernous decay. So it could be quite stable for decades or over a century, then all of a sudden it'll just go. So you see these great big holes appearing, and you can literally just rub the stone, which is full of oolites, back to its original form. So it is quite scary, and when we talk about a race against time, we are in a race against time because that stone is holding our stained glass in the building, and we have 68 unprotected medieval stained glass windows to look at, to restore rather. And then the Church of England, quite rightly, has set a very ambitious target for us to get to net zero by 2030. That's 6 years away. And when I started this project, there was no planning policy within which to help us on that journey to net zero. And the City Council declared a climate emergency in 2019. So they've set a target to get to net zero by 2030. So the clock is ticking, climate change is here, and the biggest effect on our building now is extreme weather. So high winds and rainfall. We cannot get the water off the building quickly enough. And I've been there for 7 years, and I've witnessed this over the past 7 years. So, and this winter in England, I don't know what it's been like here, it has rained for 7 months. It's been awful. So, and then heritage craft skills. We're incredibly lucky. We have one of 13 stone yards of the 42 Anglican cathedrals in England, and the largest. All the other cathedral stone yards have shut down. They've had to outsource their restoration. So you lose that affinity between the craftsperson and the building, and you lose that quality control as well. So I have a team of 50 whose job it is to care for the precinct and its estate. So at the moment, though, we entered into a 20-year plan to protect all of our medieval windows. We're 7 years into that, and at the current rate of restoration, we'd have another 30 years to go. So it's completely unsustainable. So we need to be doing more restoration at the same quality, but quicker with the same amount of the team. So, and forgive this rather amateur slide, but I drew it just to show the sheer weight of legislation that sits above me at the Minster. So quite rightly, you cannot do anything in the precinct or the estate without various acts of Parliament. So anything I do on the cathedral has to go to London for permission by the Cathedral's Fabric Commission for England, by consultation with our own Fabric Advisory Committee, and then we have the statutory authorities who give me the list of building consent and planning permission, and then of course you've got the Ancient Monuments Act. So it's hugely, hugely complex. How on earth do you make the changes that we need to in an estate like this, particularly with the net zero agenda? So I used a piece of planning legislation that was brought in 2011 by the coalition government at the time. Our planning system is very different to yours here in America. It's a nightmare. Originally, it was created after the Second World War to restrict overdevelopment in England. So the original Act of Parliament dates from 1947, and really it hasn't been updated since then. Its last update was in 1990. But if you want to do anything quickly, you can't, basically. But there was an Act of Parliament brought about called the Localism Act, which was designed to give the power back to local communities to set land for development, for residential development and employment development. And I used it to create our own bespoke planning policies against which we could bring forward the changes in the precinct that we need to care for the cathedral. So it's effectively a zonal master plan that splits the estate into 4 core areas, focusing on business, our ancillary space, and the facilities that we need to support our visitor journey. And I looked globally at the policies around sustainability, because what is happening globally, it's not a national issue. This isn't focused just on England. It's a global issue, climate change. So our policies are embedded in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is really, really important because it's given it credibility on a national policy scale. So, and then we have a suite of other policies, A to F, listed here to support the principles of change in the precinct. And on the back of that adopted plan, which was adopted by the City Council in 2022, we've secured an avalanche of consents. Some projects are on site at the moment, and many have actually completed, as you'll see shortly. The first was the creation of the new refectory, which is in our old song school, which sadly closed during COVID. And this building is a Grade 2 listed building, so the lowest status of protection in English planning law. But what we did here is we replaced the Westmoreland slate roof, which is a green slate, with a Welsh slate roof, and embedded in the roof solar slates. Now, at the time, this doesn't look very game-changing, but it was a huge thing in York. The conservation officers just wouldn't accept that this building should be used for net zero, and that it would set an unhelpful precedent. And when we went to planning committee, they argued vehemently against agreeing to it. The planners unanimously approved the permission, and now it is finished and on site. You cannot tell that that roof is generating 11,000 kilowatts of power a year, which is running the air source heat pumps that are heating the building. And it was given an energy performance certificate of a B, which is completely unheard of in York. So normally my buildings all fail. So a major step in the right direction. So the rudder on the oil tanker is hard over, but it's going to take time for it to shift. And we were very lucky His Majesty's first Royal Maundy was held at York, and we rather cheekily asked Buckingham Palace would he open it for us, and he agreed. So here he is unveiling a ledger stone to mark that important event. And of course His Majesty has been lobbying about climate change and the importance of climate change since the 1960s. And if the world had listened to him then, we wouldn't be in the position we are now. So he was very, very interested in all of the sustainable elements of this, including the living wall here, which is all about increasing biodiversity within the precinct. This is the choir roof, which dates from 1475. It's actually burnt down in 1836. A disgruntled choir member set fire to the organ burnt and the whole roof went. So it's actually a Victorian roof, which helped me make the case to the planners that it was appropriate to put solar panels on the roof of this is a CGI. So we got permission to put 199 solar panels on the choir roof, so the most on any cathedral in the world. They will produce enough energy to power a third of the building by this Christmas. And unless you're a pigeon, you will never see that view. So from the ground, you can't see. You get glimpse views through the parapet. But my planning argument was accepting that we are harming the setting of a Grade 1 listed building, but the public benefit far outweighs that harm. And the public benefit here is that we're leading by example. And in 25 years' time, when the grid is net zero, take them off, and you've got a lead roof again. So, but that has only happened because of the Neighbourhood Plan and because of the adopted policies within that document. This is College Green, which was an underutilised part of the precinct. It's now a vibrant park. We had to take a number of trees down. We had people threatening themselves they were going to chain themselves to these trees. Trees have a life and they come to the end of their life. So they came down and they've been replaced by an avenue of cherries now, and it looks super, but it's letting light back in, which has meant we can plant it and increase biodiversity. This is Church House, which we've recently converted into apartments to bring in revenue. The annual revenue of that building will pay for the restoration of one nave window a year, just to put it into perspective. So you can see the theme that's happening here. This is St. William's College, which was completed in 1450. It's been derelict for 10 years, an absolute disgrace. But we've just completed the restoration of the roof, so it's watertight, and this building will be converted next year into chapters headquarters, so the equivalent of St. Andrew's Hall, bringing it back to life and into use. And we will use surplus power from the Minster at the weekends to power some of this building when it'll be used for banqueting and conferencing. It's the most incredible building. And and then that'll free up space in another building which we will turn to apartments. This is a consent that I secured last year. Now, it might not look very much. It's an old house that we're turning into staff offices, but it was such an important consent because, again, we've got a Welsh slate roof with solar tiles generating the power to run the air source heat pumps. But what was so important about this planning consent was that we got permission to put double glazed wooden sliding sash windows into a listed building. That might not sound a big thing, but normally in York, there's absolutely no way you can put double glazed windows into a listed building. But how on earth do you insulate an old building if you haven't got double glazed windows? And you can't actually see from the road that they are double glazed. And then this is a major policy of the Neighbourhood Plan, Queen Elizabeth Square, which was originally envisaged to mark the Platinum Jubilee with placing a statue on the West Front. Events took over. The statue went up on the 1st of August 2022, waiting for an unveiling, and we all know what happened. So actually, when His Majesty unveiled the statue, it was the first memorial statue to the late Queen. So the first piece of the jigsaw puzzle for a wider regeneration project at the front of the cathedral. And there it is. As soon as the King left, the team was straight up to put pigeon netting in front of the statue, because they were, you can't see them on this picture, but you could see them waiting to get onto the diadem. So you can't see the netting. Now, this is a really, really important project, one that's very close to my heart. It's the Centre of Excellence for Heritage Craft Skills and Estate Management. So we've partnered with cathedrals and heritage bodies around the world, and the vision is that we become a hub of all this knowledge to share with others. So it's effectively a campus development with 2 sites. The first site is the Heritage Quad, and this is where our stonemasons are going to be based. So they'll be based in the new workshop here, so 15 banker masons. The building to the right there will provide accommodation for our first-year apprentices and visiting apprentices from our global network with ancillary support space. My brief to the architect was that the building needed to inspire the next generation of craftspeople and to be able to be seen from the city wall. We could very easily have sent everyone off-site to an industrial estate, a fraction of the cost, but if we'd done that, you'd have lost the affinity between craftsperson and the cathedral. So you can see the cathedral in the background of all of this, and that affinity is so important. And of course, we've had apprentices on site since the mid-11th century. There are 3 distinct roof types on this development. So the first is solar, that's generating all of the power to run this. It's been built to be very, very low energy. So ground source and air source heat pumps will heat the building. It's been built to passive house standards, and then a living roof in the corner building there. This central roof will collect all of the rainwater to flush the loos and water the gardens. So very, very sustainable. And these are the first gargoyles at the Minster, we think, since the early 17th century. So that's where the water will come out, so a little bit of fun. This is the technology hub. This is where state-of-the-art technology is going to be installed. These are the 2 latest CNC cutting machines, which are currently being built in Breton and will arrive in York on the 12th of June. I'm hoping when I get back from my holiday that roof structure is more advanced than it was when I left. We discovered extensive archaeology when we were building this building. I'd rather foolishly assumed when we did the bore tests, which didn't show anything up, that it was all previously disturbed. And it wasn't until we cleared the big concrete slab that we found extensive late medieval structures, and a fascinating site, but the archaeologists were there for 8 weeks. So we are slightly behind schedule. And the whole of the roof structure here, again, is covered in a state-of-the-art solar that will produce about 40% of the energy to run the whole building and the offices. Now, what we're doing, the whole vision behind here is to protect the heritage craft skills, but also to embrace modern technology as a tool. So this is a really good example. This is a ProLiner, which is used in the kitchen manufacturing industry to measure templates for stone work surfaces. we've started using it to template our tracery windows. So traditionally that would have taken about 10 days to do with tracing paper and then pieces of wood. Using this precision piece of technology, it now takes 2 days and puts it straight into AutoCAD, so there is no room for error. So it's upskilling the team. We're still creating the templates in the traditional way, but we're just doing it faster. Now you apply that 80% saving to all of the work, you can see where we are going on this journey. And the statue of the Queen, by pure chance, has become a symbol of the whole Centre of Excellence. So originally, when I named the square Queen Elizabeth Square, it was to get the whole city behind it, so as a civic celebration and a civic opportunity. It's actually been created using this blend of ancient craft skills and modern technology. So this is the original maquette that Richard made in the traditional way, out of clay, which was then scanned, and then that scan was blown up, which meant we could mill a piece of polycarbonate to create the scale model, which all of the sculptors use when they're building grotesques. But it's so light we could lift it up onto the niche. This is a delegation from the Cathedral's Fabric Commission for England. So they could actually physically see the massing of the statue in the niche and provide advice. That's the finished model. That's Richard Bossons, the designer of the statue, scanning it. This is a photogrammetry model of the bust, so you can see how accurate it is. And then Richard, who was very much against using technology at the start, slowly came round to its use. This has been a very slow, gentle process, so the team don't feel it's been forced on them. They've all been on the journey. If you'd given a medieval mason access to one of these saws, they'd have snapped your hands off, because the medieval masons were always pushing the boundaries of technology. So none of this is new in theory. The Minster Central Tower collapsed 3 times during construction because they were pushing the boundaries all the time. So this is Richard looking at a saw that we used, and he actually decided, originally this was taking it down to 5 mil, but what he was saying here, you have no reference points for the carving. It was too broad, and he eventually asked it to go down to 0.5 millimetre, so you can start to see the eyelashes defined and the eyeballs, and that gave him the references that he needed to then finish everything by hand. And so this is a type of saw that we're going to be getting. So it's doing the roughing out, basically. So what would have taken Richard 4 months took the machine 160 hours. So a microcosm again. The saw will do the roughing out stage, the laborious task, and then the mason will finish everything by hand. So no heritage craft skills lost. I won't play the whole thing because you can see. And then here we are. So on the left we have the maquette, and on the right we have the maquette, and on the left we have the stone straight off the saw. So there was a lot of stone left here to protect the neck on its journey up from Wales. The limestone came from France because we couldn't get the bed height in England. So a 3-ton piece of stone arrived in York at 1.2 tons. So you can see how much wastage there is in stonemasonry and how much the saw removed. And then Richard spent the next 4 months finishing everything by hand, ready for unveiling. So these are some of the partners that we've met and are working with through the Centre of Excellence. Our latest partner is Christchurch Cathedral in New Zealand, and Emma, our latest stonemason apprentice to finish, is now working in New Zealand. So the partnerships are starting to work. The National Cathedral in Washington was our first partner, and they were instrumental in giving us the advice around the technology we should be looking at. So it was Washington that said, go and visit Breton and look at these saws. So, and what I found on speaking to all of these partners is that we're all dealing with exactly the same issues, whether you're in New Zealand or India or Washington, the climate emergency, not having enough skilled, trained people to look after the building, and then the scale of restoration. So York will be this knowledge hub that we will share with this international community. And now the next project we're looking at is our new library, our new museum rather. So this is our 12th century library. We have the most incredible collection of first edition books that are literally covered in mould. So those will be taken out and restored, and then they will go back into a climate controlled library space with a dedicated gallery space so that we can lend our collection to other institutions and have their collection back to us, with a big learning centre and a huge opportunity for the city and our other partners. So the Neighbourhood Plan is doing exactly what it was intended to do. It took 4 years to write and get adopted, but because of that, we're now well on track to be delivering nearly £15 million of investment by the end of this year. And by Christmas, we'll be producing 40% of our energy on site. So the biggest producer of carbon globally is energy production. So I hope by the end of the decade we'll be producing closer to 60%. And as technology increases its efficiency, that's going to be easier and easier to do. And then our Centre of Excellence will open in September, and then will be officially open next year. So we'll start taking our first apprentices in September. So an awful lot going on in York at the moment, and I hope if you are in York or visiting the United Kingdom, you'll come and see us and say hello. And I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much, Alex. This is really an impressive presentation. Yes, so do you have any questions or any observations or any reactions to what we've just heard?
In your employment of technology, do you use 3D printing?
Well, we don't at the moment, but we are looking at it. So what we would like to do is to use the stone dust that's produced in the production of the milling machine to then 3D print certain interior features. So, for an example, a capital head in the nave, which is decorated by foliage. A lot of that's broken over the years, where 3D printing, we could literally put up a platform lift, scan it, and then 3D print it and pin it on. So from the ground, it would look like stone. Well, it's made of stone because it's come from the material. So the opportunities presented by 3D printing are huge. But at the moment, it is still quite embryonic technology, and it's expensive. But things are moving so quickly that we will be in the next couple of years. Yeah. Thank you for your question.
How much staff do you have? Because I don't know how you do all this.
We have a team of 50, including me, so not a huge amount, and that's a really important observation. So the South Choir Aisle is our biggest restoration project at the moment, which when we started was was focused on the tracery and nave windows, clerestory windows. And it was only when the scaffolding went up that we found major cracks in the South Choir transept, which is here, because the geology, the hydrology of the precinct is changing because of extreme weather, as I was explaining. So this has jumped from a 10-year project to a 20-year project, and this is 10% of the Minster. So the 90% rest of the building continues to deteriorate. So that cavernous decay I was showing you is still happening everywhere else. We can only do so much. So the team of 50 are almost just tickling the restoration. But by moving towards embracing this technology, we hope to be speeding up the process. So we hope to be on track to finish this by the end of the decade and then move straight across to the North Choir Aisle. And then after that, we've got the central tower to restore. That'll be a 10-year project. So yes, it's a little bit overwhelming if you think about it in too much detail. So we do as much as we can with a limited team, but we are incredibly lucky that it is the biggest team in the country. We have the most of any works department. So it's yes, it's tricky. It'd be lovely to have 3 times that.
Have others in the community joined in this, institutions and buildings, to adopt this technology, particularly solar panels?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So when we started this process, I was literally starting from the answers no, what's the question? because people just couldn't get their head around change in a precinct like this and didn't want to see change, which is the whole beauty of the Localism Act, that you bring your local community with you. And the slide I showed you earlier of solar panels on the roof of York Minster, 5 years ago, people would have been up in arms about that. So it's a mixture of the adopted planning policy that we have in place with the support of the local community, but also the whole narrative around climate change, even in the past 12 months, is changing. And what's happening in Dubai with the flooding and everything. So people now get it. And it was interesting in the taxi from the port this morning, I noticed that JFK are about to cover their entire car park with solar panels. So it is happening globally, but sadly not fast enough. So, but yes, it is, to answer your question, sorry, it is the community are behind it and supportive of it. Yeah.
We have time for a couple of questions.
That Victorian limestone, as a percentage, how much of the building right now is using that?
It's about 15%, so it's quite a lot. The legacy that they've left, it's not just the ketten, they also used iron cramps to reinforce some of the window sills of the cathedral. Iron, as we know, rusts, and the power of the rust is incredible. I mean, it's literally lifting pieces of stone that weigh over a ton. So it's not just the ketten we need to get off, we've also got to remove all the iron cramps. But in their defence, they were doing the best that they thought at the time. I'm sure in 100 years' time they'll think, what on earth are we doing, putting 3D printed stone on the capital heads? So you can only do your best. So, but sadly, it's fallen on our watch to correct that mistake.
Yes, I don't think this is really part of your talk, but glass. I think you have some of the oldest glass in England.
We do, yes. And I just explained at the start, before you arrived, that we have the largest repository of in-situ medieval glass in England, and some of it dates back to the 11th century. So an incredible collection of international importance. And it's a chapter of York's responsibility to care for that and fund its restoration. So I don't know if you remember the slide I showed you. We had a 20-year plan in place to put protective glazing in all of our glass. And at the current rate, we'd have we're 7 years into that programme, but because of the state of the stone, we'd have another 30 years to run. So it's a very precious collection.
Thank you so much. I mean,
Thank
this has
you.
been an impressive presentation. And whenever I hear things of this kind, my mind always goes, this is a place which was conceived for worship. So basically it is worship which is driving this enormous development. So we always think about worship kind of being a drive for the development of beauty, of art, pictorial arts, etc., but also technology. Technology is being driven by worship, by the kind of desire to worship it together in the best possible way. And now it's very impressive to hear that even kind of environment concerns are driven by worship in the same sense. So there is a sense in which the more we focus on the core of Christian identity, and the more we take it seriously, the more everything comes with it.
Yeah.
So it's really this is just a little theological link to your lecture, because
Absolutely. Well, it's the fifth mark of mission, caring for God's creation, so which humans haven't been very good at. So we're trying to lead by example.
Yes. So and this is really great. So thank you so much.
Thank you for asking me.
Thank
you.
If I may, we have a visitor. So Archbishop Stephen Cockle is here visiting the community. Would you like to say a word to our group of this is a Sunday morning theology class? Since we'll be here, we want to give you a welcome, a warm welcome.
So thank you. I'm Stephen, the 98th Archbishop of York. There's been a Bishop of York since the year 627. This place and the heritage that we have is such a joy and such a blessing, and to be a small part of the history of this church and this place is very humbling. But as Luigi has just said, the purpose remains the same. You know, we live in a world where there's so much hurt and so much confusion, so much sorrow. And what our world needs is what God gives us in Jesus Christ, and that's the reason York Minster exists. And I guess some of you may have been there, but if you haven't, if you ever get the chance to step inside the building, is to have your soul and spirit lifted, to inspire us to great things, which is what God wants from us. Perhaps, as you've given me the floor for a moment, I can pay tribute to Alex. Alex, I've heard him speak about the building before, obviously, but I just caught the end of this. We do have a really big vision, and we have incredible buy-in from the local community. What we're doing at the Minster will be transformative, not just for the Minster, but for our city. And quite frankly, it wouldn't have happened without Alex. It's been his vision, but also his ability to draw people together and to inspire and to build coalitions and alignment, which has been such a game changer. You probably won't be surprised to hear that, having just listened to him speak, but he would be obviously far too modest to say that yes, great things are happening, we need support and help, but they wouldn't have happened without Alex. So thank you for this small opportunity to...
It's a pleasure, it's a pleasure. And obviously Archbishop Stephen is going to stay with us for the whole week.
I'm here all week.
And we will hear him today, but also you will be with us for the symposium.
I will.
So those who you know, I think most of you here and the people who are following by the live stream, if anyone is not still registered, we have almost 200 people registered for the symposium so far. We have 80 people in person, and we have 120 people who are going to follow by the live stream. So I have to say I've been overwhelmed by the response, and it is really a great and exciting time for life here at St. Thomas. So we can express our appreciation to both Alex and Archbishop Stephen. We carry on with the celebration of the Eucharist. Thank you.
Which I need to get ready for.